The Dutch were heavily involved in the transatlantic slave trade. They were latecomers compared to the Portuguese and Spanish. However, they quickly became a global naval power. They remained the most dominant European player in global trade for close to a century. This trade included the slave trade. The Dutch first became involved in the slave trade following the establishment of the Dutch West India Company, or VOC for short, in 1621. The VOC operated like a Dutch-based multinational corporation with its own army. It was a key instrument in the hands of the Dutch monarchy and wealthy aristocracy. The Dutch built their wealth on colonial expansion and trade. There was heavy competition with the Spanish and Portuguese. However, the Dutch were more efficient in their operations. They initially acquired enslaved Africans by buying them from the Portuguese and Spanish. However, they soon established their own networks, capturing Africans and transporting them to their colonies. They brought enslaved Africans to work on sugar, tobacco, and coffee plantations in the Dutch Caribbean, notably in places like Suriname, the Dutch Antilles, but also Brazil and the US. The revenues generated from the slave trade, as well as from the plantation economies, bolstered the Dutch economy, to the point where the much smaller Netherlands challenged Spain, England, and France, often defeating them in naval battles and wars. While the Dutch played a significant role in the transatlantic slave trade, it is important to note that they were not the largest slave traders in the Atlantic. The Portuguese, British, and French were more dominant in terms of the total number of enslaved Africans transported across the Atlantic. While the British abolished their slave trade in 1807 and the French in 1815, the Netherlands did not officially abolish the slave trade until 1814, influenced by changes in the global economy. The decline of the slave trade in the early 19th century was also linked to the rise of industrial capitalism, which no longer relied on slave labor in the same way that the plantation economies had. The legacy of the Dutch slave trade is still felt today in the Caribbean and South and North America, and the Netherlands itself. In the Netherlands, there has been a growing recognition of the country's colonial past and its role in the slave trade. In 2022, the Dutch government issued an official apology for its role in slavery. The Dutch celebration of Sinterklaas and Zwarte Piet, where Dutch people paint their faces black, dress up like clowns, and run around the streets acting obnoxiously. Some people have criticized this celebration as racist, while others have said that it is simply a fun traditional celebration.